I'll tell you how that came about, okay? He's in a meeting with Trudeau, and Trudeau basically says that if the U.S. imposes tariffs on Canada, Canada couldn't survive as a nation state, at which point the president said, well, then you should become a state. And that's where this began. That said, the president has made an argument for why. He says he loves Canada. He says he made an argument for why Canada would be better off joining the United States from an economic perspective and the like. He's made that argument repeatedly, and I think it stands for itself.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio leaving the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Charlevoix, Quebec earlier today. He was answering a question there about President Donald Trump's continued threats against Canada's sovereignty. Here in Canada, we now have a new Prime Minister in Mark Carney. So could he reset relations with the American president?
I look forward to speaking with President Trump. Just to be clear, we respect the United States. We respect President Trump. President Trump has put some very important issues at the top of his agenda. We understand his agenda. We understand the importance President Trump places on American workers and American jobs. We want him and his administration to understand the importance we put on Canadian workers and Canadian jobs. And we will look for avenues to work together so that both objectives are met.
All right, let's dig into this one with the front bench. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Gordon Singh, and Rachel Aiello. Mel, I want to start with you on this one. If you were in this Prime Minister's office, would you say to him that the best thing to do right now is to go sit in that Oval Office, given what we saw with Volodymyr Zelensky, but also with the backdrop of Doug Ford saying that he believes that Prime Minister Mark Carney will get along a lot better with U.S. President Donald Trump compared to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau?
So it's always a risk to do that because you never know what you're going to get with President Trump. I would recommend that he do actually exactly what he's doing next week, which is go to Europe first. So Mark Carney's planning to go to Europe. I hope that while he's there, he talks to the leaders of our European allies about coordinating our trade retaliation efforts with each other, because we are very small as an economy and in our ability to impact the United States. And so is Europe. But if we work together, we combine our efforts and we coordinate in some like asymmetrical trade warfare, then we might start to get some progress. And I think that would put him in a better position to have that sit down with Trump. You know, there are a couple of European countries, for example, that are starting to float the idea of not moving forward with their F-35 acquisitions in response to Trump's efforts. Is that something that Canada is ready to do, to instead of spending billions upon billions of dollars on an American plane, look to an alternative instead? That might be a card that we may need to play.
Gurditton, do you think a change in leadership on this side of the border is going to maybe be an opportunity for a reset at that relationship overall at the top?
Of course, any change provides a reset and an opportunity to build a better relationship. But what I think we need to recognize are two things. Trump is incredibly unpredictable. He is pushing the country, I would say, towards fascism. He is closing up with people who are fundamentally against democracy like Russia. And across the board, his agenda seems to be to create chaos, confusion, and destabilization for not just America, but the entire country. Now, in order to stand up to Trump, who is a bully, you need to make sure you have a strong opposition. The problem I have with Mr. Carney's approach right now is that in his first words, I get you don't want to ruffle the feathers that much initially, but you need to take a firm stand. And instead, he's trying to create these connections. He said, I respect what Mr. Trump is trying to do. No one should respect what Mr. Trump is trying to do. You can use language which is not inflammatory, but the approach he's taking is actually not speaking to the truth of the matter, that we need a firm, strong voice to stand up for Canada. And taking this kind of soft approach on Trump, I don't think is a productive thing to do, given we also have seen that when you stand up to Trump, it seems like then that's actually what he respects the most, those who are able to have a backbone and speak directly while looking into his eye.
Yeah, it's a narrow line to walk, Rachel, and no one I think envies Mark Carney for this, but he really, in a sense, has to try and approach it from the business point of view, which I think he's trying to say that he will. But at the same time, he continues to say, standing firm, there's no chance we're going to be the 51st state. That's all there is to it. What is your take on how sort of the two people who are positioning themselves as business leaders can maybe come together and talk about this issue and try and sort it out?
Yeah, I mean, for Donald Trump, it is all about relationships. So the pressure is absolutely on Mark Carney for when he does get on the phone with Donald Trump. We're hearing that people in his team are trying to make that happen within the next few days. But then really the test will be when he goes to D.C. Is that something he's going to try to pull a Ford on and do during an election campaign? What is really key for him is to nail that, because if the ballot question in the federal election is who is the best place to stand up to Donald Trump and handle him going forward, that is the ultimate test for Mark Carney. If he doesn't meet that moment, then Canadians will see plainly that is not a better relationship than Justin Trudeau, and perhaps that would put some new light on Pierre Poilievre, who doesn't have to go down and face Trump and be tested in the same way. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, what the calculation the Liberal campaign makes in terms of when those two men are face-to-face, if it happens before a campaign, during a campaign, or maybe after.
Sabrina, given what Rachel just said, then would you potentially, if you're in Carney's camp, say, you know what, let's not risk it, because if it goes well, then Donald Trump's no longer on the ballot. But at the same time, he could seem like Captain Canada in solving things during an election. And I mean, really, you can't buy that type of publicity, right?
Yeah, I don't really see a situation unfolding in which Donald Trump and the relationship that Canada has with the United States isn't the ballot question. I think it's just what form does that ballot question look like, in 6 weeks versus what does it look like today? And a lot of that is related to how Donald Trump responds. I think that, I've said before that this is not a status quo relationship and you can't approach it like a status quo relationship. And so the primary thing that is going to probably change Donald Trump's mind and his approach is how Americans are feeling and how Americans are responding. You've already seen that with the stock market crashes. You've seen several calls go into the White House talking about a loss in investments, talking about how that's crumbling their own businesses and their own corporations. He's floated this idea of how a recession could be patriotic. I don't think that's going to help the stock markets at all. I saw a report the other day from the Council on Foreign Relations that said from the 2017 steel tariffs or 2018 steel tariffs, labor productivity in the steel industry went down 32%. So when job losses affect the United States and they affect businesses in the United States and people in those red states, that's where he's going to listen. And I think for Canada, whether it's Mark Carney or it's our premiers or it's our leaders in cabinet, continuing to build those relationships with governors, with other business councils in the United States is really, really important because they're starting to feel the pain.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. It was a fun Friday, wasn't it, friends? And we'll do it all again next Friday with all of you. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Gurritan Singh, Rachel Aiello, thank you all for being on the front bench.